Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeff Cyphers, and I'll call the meeting to order. It's 1:01 p.m. And I'm just going to look to our council to confirm that we do have a quorum. Is that correct? Have I counted correctly?
Confirming there is a quorum present.
Great. And I've not been notified of any matters subsequent to posting the agenda. So we'll turn to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. And let's see, just want to make sure I'm able to see. So we have a couple members of the public attending. If you use the raised hand feature on your Zoom platform, if you want to make a comment, you can do that now. And I trust if any emailed comments have been made that our team will let us know. I'm not seeing any hands raised. And I'm not hearing about any emails. So I'll close that section and move to the consent agenda. This is just a single item, the minutes of June 18. And are there any questions or corrections about the minutes? Okay, seeing none, let's check for any public comment on the consent calendar. Again, you can use the raised hand feature if you've got one. Not seeing any there, so I look for a motion on the consent calendar.
I'll motion to approve.
So that's San Jose. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Silicon Valley. Let's call the roll.
For the consent agenda, Ava Community Energy,
Aye.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Aye.
Clean Power SF is absent. Peninsula Clean Energy,
Aye.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
and Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The consent agenda passes.
Okay, so we will be going into a closed session. I do want to ask if there's any public comment before we do that, and any guidance from either council or staff on expectations of time in case people in the public want to tune out for a little bit and come back. Is there any kind of estimates of or advice to the public, or should we just not try to guess?
We will keep this line open.
Okay.
So we'll say that so that the public can stay on this line.
Okay, that's fair. And so I will call for any public comment on the closed session, if any. And then I do expect, I think we are expecting a report out. Is that true? Okay, so we will be returning to public session. We do have some regular session items, and we'll expect a report out from closed session. I don't see any hands raised, and I don't think we've received any written comment. So at this point, the directors should have received a separate closed session link, and I believe staff have actually resent that link in case you misplaced it. So you should have that ready to go. But keep this link handy as well, and we'll return to this open session when we get through the closed session. So I'll see you all in 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. So it's 2:30. We're reconvening the public session and the regular agenda. And our first item, I'm going to ask General Counsel Isles to do a report out from closed session.
Yes, thank you. So during the closed session, the board members for the Tumbleweed Project participants approved an amendment to the Tumbleweed Energy Storage Services Agreement and provided direction to CC Power staff on moving forward with the execution of the amendment. And there was no other reportable action taken.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to General Manager Morris. And I think you've got a number of report outs. So we're all ears.
So thanks everybody on the board for being here today. I wanted to give some general manager updates that hopefully are focused on some of the CC Power operations, but also what's coming to warm you up. And also this is a chance for us to discuss some of these early project ideas. And just as a reminder, a lot of this was within the budget work plan. So nothing's going to be too new, although there is one item that you probably have not seen before. And this will take about 15 minutes. I welcome questions as we go. And then after this, as you know from the agenda, there's one additional item to cover before 2 o'clock. So let's jump into it. I wanted to share the exciting news that we launched the solicitation yesterday that we refer to as the BTA Phase 2A. So we can go next slide. And as you guys know, this is a fairly large, comprehensive solicitation that also includes bids specifically targeted for build transfer and direct pay. So we'll get all this information through this and be able to consider what's a good fit for the members. We do think we'll get bids by 9/20, and then, as you know, there'll be a process, and potentially we'll be on a path for shortlist by the sometime in Q4. And simultaneously, we'll have gained price information about tolls and PPAs versus the ownership and direct pay model. We'll have more information on direct pay risks as well, and we'll be in a position for members to consider what we're calling the BTA Phase 2B, which would really be the actions of some group of members to work to get into contract on a build transfer. And we've teed that up as a separate sort of project Phase 2 because there's potentially debt issuance and significant funding that would go along with the Phase 2B. So all along we knew that the 2B was separate from the 2A. But it's exciting, and I wanted to tip my hat to Philippe and a lot of your staff who've helped develop this, including developing a lot of new pro forma documents and evaluation tool. And we've got sort of the whole operation for this now up and running. So it's an exciting moment. And I look forward to getting the results back. Any questions on this? Okay, and if you do talk to developers, send them to the website and ask that they consider submitting offers. The next topic, and this is really in the Phase 1 categories, I wanted to report out briefly on the RA Power Pool Strategic Assessment 1. I know that's not the most exciting name, so we'll work on that. But what happened here, again, we're in Phase 1 where the idea is we don't, the members have given some input on possible ideas of value we could add. And we use these strategic assessments. We work with the working groups to assess if there's really value. And eventually this could lead to a decision to go into a Phase 2 on a project. So the issue at hand here was this idea that under slice of day, could some type of RA power pool approach help members to comply with RA requirements and save costs? And how might this work, and what might the benefits be? As you can understand, this is really about helping members with their RA portfolios and supporting transactions to help compliance under slice of day. For simplicity, we've called it a power pool, although I know the words power pool can mean a lot. So we commissioned some consultants to give us some help, and we've worked with the resource planning working group to assess it. What this preliminary assessment has provided was that there are somewhat material cost savings here on the order of, potentially $4 million per month for pool members. And there was a lot of assumptions, so I want to just put that, really the range here is 1 to 4 million. We did think there's some healthy conservatism in that, and it, was premised on a relatively simple model for how this power pool might work. In this, we would implement for 2025. There's no central clearing, it's all voluntary. And so that's how this model would work. But the report also highlights that you can add on different functionalities or bells and whistles to the power pool. And depending on if the members are comfortable with that, there might be more or less value depending on how you structured it. So this is somewhat complicated, but also seems to be relevant given the sort of looming implementation of the slice of day and the desire for CC Power to sort of play this role of joint action to help. So building off of strategic assessment one of the next steps we might take that we're looking at is what I'm calling strategic assessment 2. And this is where we take this blueprint of an idea and we flesh it out further with more specific portfolio analysis, a more specific implementation plan, and more specific operating models. And our hope is that if we go through strategic assessment 2, we'll have presented enough information so that members would be in a position to decide on a phase 2 go, no go by the end of the year. So specifically, members would know how much value there might be for that member under their portfolio, really what the requirements or participation aspects of this pool would look like, and then really what the cost might be for running the pool, and getting into contract on it would be the phase 2. So we're setting that up, and then since this is somewhat technical, another aspect to this is that we're going to get this fall offsite event in Davis on October 28th, and we'll probably use some of that time to walk you through some of these materials so that everybody has a chance to answer questions. We'll also have the consultants there to help respond to any questions, to really help, even at the board level, all of us be informed on what this power pool could look like and what bells and whistles might be a fit or not. So that's the RA Power Pool Strategic Assessment 1. And I'm happy to share the actual document with anyone, but I just wanted to let you know your resource planning working group participants have been in the loop on this, and it's looking like something we should continue to investigate. Any questions on this? Oh, Monica, please go ahead. Director Padilla, thank you for the question.
Yeah, just I guess maybe a high level question for consideration when you think about how to how to implement this is, it seems to me that in order for this to work, you have to have a certain amount of scale, like number of participants, and a certain amount of diversification across the portfolios, right? In terms of the resources and perhaps even load. And it feels like we're very homogenous within at least the members that I'm familiar with. So at what point do you address that? Like, how many participants do you need and how much diversification in order to extract savings and make this work?
That's a great question. To me, some of that would be addressed in strategic assessment 2. For instance, if our portfolios truly are very homogeneous, what we would see is that when we really use specific portfolio into the pool, you would see relatively limited benefits. So it may be that it doesn't make sense to move forward. And alternatively, we might see that there's still value here. And then also we'd want you to really know, what does implementation actually look like? Of course, we're eyeballing it, and it'll really be dependent on the specific members if they opt in to design it and sort of lay out the rules. But we'll try to tee that up as much as possible. I think you raise a good point, though, that the bigger the pool, the better, and that those numbers came through even in strategic assessment 1, because the more you have the participants and the more they're kind of essentially transacting through the pool, and I use the word transacting lightly, it may be just a matchmaker function, but you start to see the benefits amplify. So a bigger pool is better. And then, as I mentioned, there's these bells and whistles that can make it fancier or less fancy, and the benefits can toggle around based on that. Monica, just on that, is there anyone on your team that you'd recommend we make sure is looped in on this? Well, they probably might be already, with Chris and his team, but if you want anyone involved, just please let me know, okay?
Yeah, it would be Chris. He's the one in charge of this.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm excited about that, and I'll also follow up with the strategic assessment 1 paper, and then depending on further input from the working group, we'll be potentially moving forward with strategic assessment 2, which I should just note is also in the approved budget. Okay.
And Director Padilla's question actually triggered something for me too. So to what extent have you been thinking about potentially a long game with this approach, and whether or not some of the Western regional markets progress gets made or RAP gets extended into, California, in a manner that we could participate in. Is this, are you thinking about this being the warm-up act to some larger kind of play, or is this really kind of intended to be a standalone at this point?
Great question, Chair Cyphers. So we have looked at how this could build capabilities and opportunities for joint action that could lead to further value streams for members, but we didn't want to get ahead of anyone. Right now, these strategic assessments are just focused on the RA compliance exercise only. And so when we talked and scoped out strategic assessment 1, we thought about some of those other things, and we have looked at some of the other power pool models. And again, power pool can mean a lot to different people. It can be energy transactions versus what we're talking about here is really sort of RA attribute related transactions or pooling that could be beneficial for members without taking any of the members' control away, was kind of how we scoped it. So we can build from here, and certainly if you have a few ideas, I'd welcome them for strategic assessment too.
All right, thank you.
I saw General Counsel Braun was also queued up. So Tony, if you wanted to jump in with anything, please do.
I apologize for not being on video. I got blocked by the host, but probably will get fixed in midstream. And I don't want to drone on for minutes on this topic, Chair Cypher, but it's something I'm fairly familiar with. So you're obviously aware of RAP. It's its own pool, right? So it has the same concepts that Director Padilla had raised, as far as it's dependent on diversity and it's dependent on size in order to reap those benefits. It is worth noting they have a completely different set of rules, right? So they do not have slice of day. They do not have the PUC's rules for deliverability. They do not have the PUC's rules for NQC, just a whole host of different metrics. So I do think it's interesting to think about these things, but going back to what Alex was raising here, we'll have to make this sort of work on the front end before assessing, I think, what the where it might go and fit into other programs, which could even broaden the
I
benefit.
appreciate that. And I think for this, at this moment, I'll think of this as a wholly independent exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks, Chair Cyphers. So moving right along, I wanted to introduce a relatively new concept. And this is not something we had previously contemplated significantly. So we can go to the next slide. But with the recent, as many CCAs know, getting projects addressed in the interconnection queue satisfactorily or urgently or in a timely manner is a key priority for many of the LSCs. And so one new idea we've been looking at is related to the CAISO's interconnection process enhancements. Many of you may know this, but as they, under the latest version of this, which is still not approved by FERC, but is expected to be approved by October 1st, there's a new functionality where LSEs have an opportunity to inform the CAISO about what projects would be valuable for study. The way we refer to this is there's a sort of points allocation opportunity that each LSE has. To do that, you do have to register. So you're sort of set up to submit and convey points to prioritize projects. And there are numerous prioritization criteria the CAISO will work with. But one idea we've been considering for joint action is this question of, as LSEs submit points to ensure interconnection studies focus on the right or relevant projects, might a coordinated and legally compliant approach yield good outcomes for our members? So this is something we have not previously really socialized. We're starting to work through it. We've been researching some of the tariff language at the CAISO to better understand it. And to better understand the timing of this. The challenge, I think one of the challenges we face is the short timeline we have now to do this, which is that, you really need to register in October and then do your point submittals in late December. Assuming FERC approves this as expected, you'd have this window of time to try and think about it For some of our smaller members, there's interesting facts here where smaller LLCs may have fewer points, but they have the opportunity to really designate one project for study. And then larger LLCs may have more points, and so they may have an opportunity to strategize. And so we thought there could be value here to coordinated action and joint action. And so I wanted to mention that our process will be to explore this further and then approach the resource planning working group. But I also just wanted to put it on your radar today so that everybody's starting to understand what we're talking about when we say this interconnection optimization concept really related to these points. And we'll try to develop a further understanding of really how this could work. And I've also, very lightly checked in with the CAISO on this, and they confirmed this model is fine, at least as far as they understood it. And they reminded me that, there's this 100 subpoints line specifically available for multiple LSCs to work together. And so, we see a path here, and we wanted to flesh it out a little more. So I'll work with the team and then the resource planning working group on this. And there could be more information over the coming months on this. Any questions, or Philippe, please go ahead in case you want to add anything.
Yeah, thanks, Director Morris. Just wanted to add that there, under at least a minimum viable concept basis, there ought to be some consideration around how points would be allocated with respect to CC Power projects. So CC Power, with Alex's update previously, we've just launched our RFP. We also have an RFI mechanism within that for QC15 and later projects, so they may be able to submit information to us that we can then share with the members, so that if there is interest amongst members for the potential to explore those projects as being future CC Power projects, we could enter into exclusivity agreements with those projects and have a mechanism for members to allocate points to facilitate them getting studied. So at the very least, we want to consider how projects through CC Power that members benefit from get treated, but there's probably additional benefits where we could take an independent view and identify things like maybe there are some projects that multiple members have interest in that we could help figure out how to efficiently allocate points to. Thank
you. Director Chang, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share on this topic that our agency has been pretty active, both in sort of brainstorming an approach to the point allocation process and some of the new complications or nuances to our contracting process that we'll need to incorporate into our RFOs going forward. Part of that, for example, being a step up of development security as a project matures. And so I think there's some interesting elements where, the traditional procurement process is definitely going to be shaken up with this. So happy to share some of the things that we've put in draft form, and Ava is planning to put out an RFO probably in the next month or so to try to prepare for this next submission and to be able to submit our points. And so, happy to share some of those notes and thoughts that we have. There's going to be a lot of work that I think load serving entities will need to do to sort of standardize what will look like a new contracting process. So, happy to brainstorm and share that both with CC Power, but also with other individual CCAs if there's any interest.
Sure. Thank you. We'll follow up. Thank you. Director Padilla, please go ahead.
Yeah, similar to Director Chang, SBC has also kind of put this into play already. We issued our latest RFO, I think last week, with this approach of using this points in a two-step process with different development securities based on those points. So I guess my initial reaction to this is, well, first one idea came up. I know that we had kind of figured out how to collectively pool our import allocation rights when we were contracting for a resource. So I know that we can do it from that perspective. But I guess my initial reaction is that given the complexity of this and the newness of this and us, SBCE, trying to understand how to leverage these points in our procurement efforts, I'm not exactly sure that we're at the point where we could also figure out how to then pool them with CC Power. So, but I would want to understand at a minimum, if we find a project that we're interested in through the CC Power solicitation, at a minimum, what would you need from us in order to, you know, help secure deliverability or help your project as well? So
Yeah, I understand what you're suggesting, Director Padilla. I couldn't agree more. So as Philippe mentioned, our solicitation may give us information. We don't know where it's going to go, but we are trying to set ourselves up to at least provide sort of requests of you guys in points allocation, if that makes sense. And yeah, we'll try to flesh this out and report back to you on that as a minimum. And then if there's a path for more complicated optimizations, we can look at that too.
sure. And our RFO is on our website if you want to see our process, how we intend to use the point system.
Okay. Director Cyphers or
Yeah.
Chair Cyphers.
My request is just to keep talking about this. I think one thing, I've been a little quiet on this topic just because I don't know yet if there are any constraints on market power or collusion obligation limitations and so forth. So what I just want to do is make sure that each of us individually and perhaps CC Power generally maybe do a little education around that so we understand when we can share strategy and when we're not allowed to. This is a new topic for me, so thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome further questions. Otherwise, we'll be in touch with next steps. And again, sort of on the minimum levels, thinking about points with respect to CC Power running a solicitation. But then there's other more comprehensive ideas we can look at, and we just haven't had time to really flesh it out yet. And there's still some uncertainty because this hasn't been approved by FERC yet, although we expect that by October 1st. Okay. All right, so then we can jump on. I'll move quickly now. There's a lot more coming. So I mentioned the RA Power Pool, so strategic assessment number 2. We also have in the work plan looked at demonstration for offshore wind. We refer to that as CODIMO. We have an MOU. And although there's been some gyrations in whether the state may play a role in offshore wind contracting or not, we're also still working with CODIMO, and we think there could be a lot of value for the state in that project moving forward because there could be a lot of lessons learned. It would probably be the first West Coast floating offshore wind project. It could come online a lot sooner. And so before we would approach members with any sort of decision on CODIMO, we're still trying to understand it better. And one idea there is a site tour in the October-November timeframe. This is not a site tour on the ocean. It's just on the Vandenberg Space Force Base area. You can see where the interconnection route would occur, where they might, and we'd also meet with PG&E and the Space Force Base and the development team to better understand some specifics of it. So that could be something to look forward to, and we'll report back to you. Moving on, we're going to look at this master services agreement for scheduling coordinator services. We're also looking for SC services for our projects, but looking at a joint action cost savings approach through the MSA is something we'll consider and report back to you. And all of this is really phase 1 work, so no project decisions needed. We're just gathering information and trying to look at possible projects for you. And then we expect another information services bulk buy in Q4. And then starting in next year, we'll look on the metering and billing side at some MSA approaches to see if there's value there for members. And so one more slide. I wanted to focus the board on this fall in-person session. So I'm starting to feel really excited about it. It's coming up October 28th. The plan is to have everyone get together in Davis. So thanks to the Valley Clean Energy team for helping host. And this is not an official board meeting. It is an in-person session to support the board gelling and coming together. We may have some strategic discussion, but we won't take any board action as planned. And I'll work with General Counsel Isles on making sure that we allow the public in where necessary for this event. What it will entail is some discussions, some tours, including of the Western Cooling Center, where you'll get the latest and greatest on heat pumps, and sort of helping manage electric loads on that in that way. And then we'll have a dinner with special guests. The theme of the dinner right now is that Davis is strange, perhaps strangely, hotspot for commissioners. So there's a ton of sort of high-ranking energy officials who live in Davis. So we're thinking we would have a dinner and we could invite some special guests. And again, I'll work with General Counsel Isles to see where it's appropriate for the public to be able to join. And then many of you also may know the following day, if you're already in Davis or Sacramento, you have the Cal CCA CMUA event and then the CAISO Symposium. So this is coming together. I'm excited about it. And we're going to start pressuring you to hold that time a little more and make sure everybody's RSVP'd, et cetera. But we haven't launched a lot of the RSVPs yet. We'll do that very soon. So with that, let me move on to the final update, and then we have one more voting item after that. So lastly, just some minutia. The invoices will be going out from the WoodMac project, the BTA Phase 2A project, and the 2024-2025 GNA invoice. CC Power is hiring pursuant to the plan and the budget. The hire we're gonna go out for now is the project manager related to the power procurement and origination side. And we'll also be doing some check-ins with members, and then pretty soon we'll have our 23-24 year-end fiscal close information for you. And then following that, we'll get those financials audited. So on the kind of operations side and the finance side, I'll work with Mitch, our treasurer, to make sure that he's in the loop, and he'll be prepared to report out to the board on the fiscal close. So with that, thanks everybody. There's one more item, Chair Cyphers, that I want to try to have a little time for, and I'm sorry if we're running long, but I think it's important for us to approve this following item soon. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped this. So one last thing on the GM update, disclosing contracts we've signed. The contract to disclose here is an executive coaching agreement with Girish Balachandran, former CCA and utility executive. So this is a not to exceed of $40,000. The way we approached this was through a strong showing. We looked at a couple executive coaches and ended up picking Girish, who, as many of you know, has a lot of the right expertise. And I'm greatly looking forward to working with him in this context.
Thanks for doing that. So we'll go to item 8C. Actually, I should probably check for public comment on items 8B inclusive. Is there any public comment on that? I'm not seeing hands raised. Okay. So let's move on to the regular calendar item 8C, and this is on computer-based training. Thanks.
So I'll speak to this quickly, Chair Cyphers. Thank you. And Amy, if possible, we have one slide on the same deck to pull up. But so this is a great one, pretty easy, I think, because this is an opportunity that really is low commitment for you guys as members. What we're proposing is an approval of a computer-based training contract that CC Power would enter into on your behalf. It would give you or your boards or your staff access to these computer-based trainings, and only if you use them would you pay. The nature of the contract as we're structuring it is going to be for 4 computer-based trainings, a FERC anti-market manipulation training, which is really focused on your procurement and energy trading staff, but then an array of sort of helpful trainings called the Grid 101, a Grid 201, and a CCA 101. And I always think of the 3CE team for these because they have such a large board where, it'd be really helpful to have some trainings that help their board get further on the path of being ready to evaluate CCA operations. And so that's really the purpose of the 101 and 201 and CCA 101. The structure here would be a phase 3, which means we'd have a cost share agreement. And so then those who use the training can be invoiced against that cost share agreement. We don't expect the trainings to be, very expensive. These are, consider it like less than an hour computer-based training each. And so we don't know the full cost for each training because some of these are still in design. But if it's helpful, you should range from $200 to $500 per training. And so on top of that, we would track it. Every member will have its own code. So we know that if your board was taking it, they would take it under this code and we would invoice you for that, and you would never be charged for others taking the training. So that's the design of this phase 3. And I also wanted to just say that 3CEs, Catherine Stedman has helped. It's been great to have input from folks who work with their own boards. And so, making sure we're designing trainings we think will be useful. And anyone's welcome to participate in this design. But what we wanted to do now is move forward with the contracting phase, and then we'll finish up the 101s and the 201 so that they'll be available by the end of the year.
So I've just received notice that a couple of our members probably need to drop in the next minute or two. So I want to check and just see, is there any discussion needed on this? I will observe, I don't believe there's a net cost to CC Power for this action, right? So this is approval you're seeking to enter into an agreement where each of us as members would be obligated to pay our full freight. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I want to check, are there any questions from the board on this before we go to public comment? I want to see if everyone can get a chance to vote. Go ahead, Barb.
Quick question is, who are you contracting with? Is the name of the organization Computer-Based Trainings?
No, sorry, the contract is with a company called NAES. They're a large computer-based training firm, and they own and operate their own power plants. They provide what I would call a nearly identical service to SCAPA.
I saw that in the
For
memo.
trainings.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right. I think I am going to check for public comment now. This is item 8C on computer-based training. I don't see any hands, so I'll look and see, is anybody ready to make a motion? I know I'm moving quickly, but so you can check me if this is too quick, but does
I'll
anyone?
make a motion.
See, that was San Jose. Is there a second?
Second.
Peninsula. Okay, let's call the question.
Okay, for resolution 240801, Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes,
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I know our members who have to drop at 3 appreciate it as well. So we are at adjournment. Given that I rushed the last item a little, is it any closing thoughts on that, or are we good? Okay.
From my standpoint, we're all set. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Chair
Super.
Cyphers.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we will adjourn the meeting. It is 3:04 p.m. We'll see you soon.